It is not your fault that you were hurt. It is not your fault that you were forced to experience trauma. It is not your fault that you have had to walk through hard things. That's not your fault. But how you respond to what is coming at you. If it's not on you, who's responsible for that? Hi guys, it's Rach. Welcome to another episode of RHP, which is our shorthand for the Rachel Hollis Podcast. I am glad that you're here. I'm glad that you want to listen to today's conversation, or maybe you're watching it on YouTube, but whatever has brought you here today, I'm glad. And I hope you find it helpful, because today I'm going to share things that have really helped me over the last decade as it pertains to mood, as it pertains to how can we feel the best that we can possibly feel? How can we be happy? How can we be joyful? How can we be energized and excited, even when we find ourselves in the midst of hard seasons, even when we are forced to interact with the coworker that we can't stand, or our mother-in-law is the worst, or we're not really sure about our boyfriend's friends and we don't really like them. Like, whatever situation you find yourself in, today's conversation is how you control your own mood inside of those varying experiences. And I guess that's where we should start with right off the top, is that today's conversation is focused on us taking ownership of our experience of this life. If I've said it once, I've said it 9 million times, but you cannot control what happens to you in life. This idea, this philosophy goes back to ancient stoicism. Can't control what happens to you, but you can control. You are in control of your response to it. And it's in that awareness of us maintaining control that we can experience incredible freedom, and we can experience a life that feels so much better than maybe how we were raised, or maybe where we find ourselves currently. But that's my intention today. I want to talk about this idea that we can take control of our mood. We can take control of our attitude. We can take control of our mindset. And I'm saying that at the top because you don't have to totally believe that that's true. But I think in order for this episode to be helpful to you, you've got to at least be curious about how that might be true. This is one of those things that people really get locked into. They get really up in arms. They get really stuck. This is the hill that people decide they're going to die on. This idea that you know what? It's not my fault that I feel this way. It's not my fault that my parents were this. It's not my fault that I lost my job. It's not my fault that my partner cheated on me. Like, I can't help the way I feel because these things have happened to cause my feelings. And you are totally right. It is not your fault that you were hurt. It is not your fault that you were forced to experience trauma. It is not your fault that you have had to walk through hard things. That's not your fault. But how you respond to what is coming at you. If it's not on you, who's responsible for that? When I first heard this idea, it wasn't something I needed to be convinced of. It really resonated very deeply with me, because I don't know about y'all, but I have known so many people in my lifetime that didn't have a lot of money, maybe had one or two really good friends, maybe they had a blue-collar job, they were working real hard, they didn't have much, but they're the happiest freaking people I've ever met. They didn't have much by worldly concerns, but they were the wealthiest people that I know of. They were joyful. They loved their life. They loved their family. They put goodness into the world. Some of those people that I know had lived through incredible trauma, had lived through horrific experiences in some cases, and yet found themselves to be the happiest people I've ever met. And by the same token, we live, most of us, in cultures and society that tells us what will make us happy, right? if we have the nice outfit, if we have, $1 million in the bank, if we have a certain number of followers on social media, if we're pretty, if we're thin, if we're well connected, if we're loved by somebody else. Like, our society has this whole list of things that are supposed to make us happy. And a lot of them, at least in America or Western culture, is wrapped around this idea of success. Like, if you have success, then you'll be happy. But just in case y'all have never met a millionaire, or maybe even a billionaire, I've met a few billionaires in my lifetime. I can tell you, I have very rarely met someone super wealthy that when I met them, I thought, dang, I want their life. I want to be that person. I've met a lot of people who have a lot of money, but rarely do I meet people who have a lot of money and I aspire to be that kind of person. It isn't a guarantee that if you achieve success, you will be happy. Because in fact, a lot of people I know who have achieved success are very unhappy. So how can that be true? How can it be true that there are people who have everything they could possibly desire, and yet they are so deeply unhappy? And there are people who, by the world's measure, don't have a heck of a lot, but live every day with joy. How can that be true unless our joy and our happiness in life has nothing to do with external circumstances? Joy and happiness and living life with purpose and with passion, it's not about the external. It's about the internal. It's about what is going on inside of our heart, what is happening inside of our spirit. How do we feel on the inside? That is what is truly in control of mood. Our internal world is what is providing our external viewpoint. Our internal world is the lens through which we see the world around us. And most people are going through life with a lens, with a filter that is affecting them in a negative way, but they don't understand that they can change their glasses. They don't understand that they're in control of that view. So that's what I want to talk about today. For those of you who hang out with me a lot, it will be unsurprising to you that today's entire conversation is going to be wrapped through the lens of some spiritual, hippie, woo-woo stuff. But if this is your first time hanging out with me, number one, thank you. I'm glad you're here. But number two, even if you haven't heard this before, or even if you have been given a different modality to approach feeling good and being happy and being in a good mood, give this a consideration. Just listen to the conversation and consider it. Because there are those people who will cling to the idea that they are entitled to their bad mood. You and I, we all know somebody, right? We all have somebody, probably in our family, that is just, they are entitled to their bad mood. And they've been entitled to that bad mood for 40 years. We all got an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a second cousin twice removed. And man, Carol has been clinging to the divorce she got back in 87. She's still pissed off about the divorce that she got back in 1987. We all have that member of our family, right? She still hates men because of something that happened to her in 1987. Man, I am sorry, Carol, sweet Carol, Auntie Carol, yeah, he sounded terrible. I am so sorry for you that happened 40 years ago. But if you are still clinging on to a bad mood based on trauma that happened 4 decades ago, or a decade ago, or honestly, a year ago, if you're still clinging to the mood that happened because of a past experience, it is no longer the fault of the husband who did you wrong, or the boss that never treated you fairly, or, the way that you didn't get into the college of your dreams, and if only you'd gotten. At some point, At some point, it's not about them. It's not about what they did. It's about you and what you choose to do from here. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I hope that you find it helpful. I guess I'd love to just dig in really quickly. I love that I'm pretending that you guys are in front of me and I'm like teaching a class right now. Let's open our books to page 22. I'd love to just touch on who this conversation might be most helpful for. I really feel like understanding mood and how we can live with more joy and how we can stop being controlled by external factors. I think that is applicable to every human being. I think this is something we should all be taught as children, and we rarely are taught this. It's something I've only really learned in the last 15 years, but I think that this could be particularly helpful for those of you who find yourself in a bad mood. And we, throughout our lives, throughout the month, certainly we have moments where we find ourselves in a bad mood. But for those of you who are in a bad mood that has lasted more than a day, like it's been a few weeks, it's been 6 months, it's been 10 years, and maybe that makes some of you chuckle, but if we're being honest with ourselves, there are times where the bad mood does last that long, right? So a bad mood to me would be being pissed off, feeling angry, feeling bitter. Maybe it's a sense of the world's picking on me, or, just people are the worst, or there's, everywhere you go, there's crazy people. There's just like these ideas that we have about the world around us that make us feel anything other than good. And we could do an entire podcast about the idea of the words good and bad. This is semantics. You can call those moods anything that feels appropriate to you. I use bad because it's a bad mood, right? We all know that term. But a different way to say it would be any vibration, any mood, any energy that you find yourself sitting in that feels like suffering, that doesn't feel good. That's who this conversation is for. Now, I'm going to add one more caveat. I love 14 different prefaces before we get into the meat of the conversation. But one more caveat here is there are times in our lives where we are in the midst of something where it feels absolutely impossible to control our mood. And it's important to establish that those times exist, because it's easy to hear a conversation like this and go, well, that doesn't apply because I find myself in a season of grief. And so I can't possibly control my attitude. And I am in 100% agreement with you. So I want to just establish kind of different ways to look at the seasons that you're in, to understand if you are in a season where you could take control of your response. So the way that I thought of this was environmental. And gosh, I really hope that this conversation makes sense, because it makes sense in my mind. If this doesn't totally track, or if there's some part of today's chat that you really want to understand better, call and leave me a voicemail on the hotline and just let me know, like, hey, Rach, can you take a deeper dive into this? 737-400-4626. I'll pull it into an upcoming episode of Ask Rach. This is a visual that I came up with to think about external circumstances and how it affects us internally and how it affects the way we think and the way we feel. All right. So there's a few different scenarios, but in every single one, I'm going to use water as the analogy, because I think as human beings, when we are in water, it is a really great visual to think of our environment. Wherever you're listening to this, you're driving down the road, you're sitting on your couch, you're taking a walk. That's something you do every day. So I don't know that we even think about, oh, wow, I'm in an environment right now that is affecting me in a lot of different ways. But if you're in the ocean versus if you're in the river versus if you're in your neighbor's pool versus if you're in a mountain, lake, or wherever, if you are in a body of water, you are aware that you are in a different environment. So I feel like this is a really good visual. So we'll start with a tidal wave. That's the words that I thought of first when I considered seasons that it feels totally impossible to control my mindset. Now, I am certain that there are, spiritual gurus and really incredible teachers and people who have spent their life figuring out how to control their mood. And no matter what happens to them, they can retain their equanimity and they can let the feeling pass through them and they don't get wrapped up in the emotions. I am not there yet. Okay. I have not ascended to this level of mastery. Given how dramatic I am, I don't know if it's possible that I will do that in this lifetime. I'm not even aiming for that. I'm aiming to be in control of my mood most of the time. I don't always get there, but there are certainly seasons where it is completely impossible to control my mood because I am just trying to survive. And that I describe as a tidal wave. That is a giant wave that you don't know is coming, and all of a sudden it knocks you over. And I don't know if you've ever been caught in a wave in the ocean, but like you don't know which way is up and you're sort of swirling around like you're in a washing machine. Maybe it's slamming you into the reef like that scene in Blue Crush. Maybe you're trying to find your way up to the surface and you can't really breathe. To me, those are seasons of grief. Those are seasons of pain or loss. That's in my life, like when I've lost someone, when I had a miscarriage, when I went through divorce, when something has happened in my family, that so much is going on. You are not just holding space for your own emotions and your own feelings. You're also, for many of us, we're parents or we have friends or family members who count on us. So we're trying to take care of other people, not just ourselves. That's a tidal wave. And if you are listening to this and you are in a tidal wave, this idea is probably not going to be helpful, because in those seasons, it's like, if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you are on the most basic level of survival. You're not thinking about like, how can I approach this with peace and joy in my heart? No, you're like, how do I make it to the end of the day? Like, how do I get up and take a shower and take care of these kids when I don't know how to get out of bed right now? Like, let's be real. There are seasons where you're doing the best that you can, and the best that you can is survival. So if you are in the tidal wave, not the conversation for you. Just, you can go ahead and stop this podcast and go listen to Casey Musgrave's new album, because it's just beautiful and there's a lot of hope in it. And the melodic, calm melody and her soothing voice will make you feel better. That's where you're at. My instinct, though, is that if you are truly in a tidal wave, you wouldn't even be listening to a podcast, right? Like, even some of you are like, no, I'm still in a tidal wave, but you're sort of on the outskirts of the wave. Like, you're actually, the wave washed you up on shore and you're like trying to catch your breath again. And you've been cut up by the rocks that you slammed into, and you're emotionally and physically exhausted from trying to survive, but you're not actually in the wave anymore. And maybe you listen to this podcast because some instinct inside of you said, you know what, I need to start getting some tools in my toolbox that will help me through this, which is incredible. And I'm glad you're here. Stick with it. Even if you don't do anything I'm going to say today, maybe just listening and like, ooh, that's an idea for later might help you. Okay. So a tidal wave season is not one where we want to take this on. The second type of environmental water situation that I thought of was the total opposite of a tidal wave. And that is, imagine that you are in a lake. There is no current whatsoever. It is flat as glass. And you're in the middle of the lake and you're half a mile from shore in either direction in this lake. The only bummer is you don't know how to swim. You're in the middle of this lake, you're laying on your back, floating, because that's the only thing that you know how to do. And in this scenario, maybe a couple times you tried to save yourself by getting to shore. You tried to doggy paddle. You freaked out because, oh my God, I don't know how to swim. You flip back onto your back and you're just floating in this lake thinking, you know what? As long as I don't try and move, nothing can hurt me. As long as I just stay here and I don't move and I don't cause any ripples and I don't do anything, I'll be okay. As long as I stay here in this lake, not moving, maybe eventually someone else will come and save me from this lake, right? I'm just going to stay here. I'm not going to hurt anybody and nobody's going to hurt me. Some of you find yourself in a season like that right now. Some of you have been so hurt that you are staying in this stasis. You're staying in this comfort zone. You're staying where you feel like you will be okay. As long as you don't try and do anything, as long as you don't make any waves yourself, you're going to be safe and you're going to be okay. But if this was a real situation where you found yourself in this like space where nothing happens to you and you don't happen to anything else, this is no way of living. This is no way of living. This is a state of numb. That's a whole other kind of mood, right? Where we do things to numb our emotions. We do things to mute. We do things to color the parts of us that feel hard. Or how about this? The parts of us that feel hard to other people. How many of you find yourself in a season right now where you think it's better to have no emotion at all rather than have an emotion that would be uncomfortable for your partner? It's uncomfortable for my family when I feel this way, so I'm just going to feel nothing at all. I love this reminder that if we don't feel something, we can't heal something. And I also know what it's like to be in seasons where numbing my emotions felt like the survival technique. It felt like if I have to feel how torrential all of this is, I'm not going to be able to survive. And so it would be better for me to, in the past, my thing was always to drink. Like, I'm going to have a drink and that's going to numb my emotion. But then even if I was just having a drink, that led to a whole other kind of mood because alcohol is a natural depressant. And then I would feel sort of sad. And then I would wake up the next morning and I'd be bummed at myself. Like, oh, I know I shouldn't be using that as a coping mechanism. And now I'm feeling sad and it would throw my sleep off. And it was just this negative cycle. It never got better. And I can see so clearly now that I have gotten stronger and that I've gotten to this place where I can allow myself to feel the emotions and I can allow myself to process them. But without question, I didn't have that ability 5 years ago. Here's a really good example of this from my life, guys. I have talked a lot about having anxiety over the years. I've had anxiety as an adult for a very long time. And one of the greatest tools that I found, I'm so grateful for adaptogens, specifically an adaptogen called holy basil. It's a type of basil leaf. I have recommended this to everybody, but holy basil is a supplement that I took every night for 5 years. And it was incredibly helpful with my anxiety. The way that I always describe it to people is that it's like you can still see what's giving you the anxiety, but it's like you're outside the feeling instead of drowning inside it. So I love this supplement and I'm so grateful for it. It helped me so much. But I guess probably maybe 9 months ago, I started to get the intuition that it was time to go off of holy basil. And it really scared me because I had gone off of it. I'm sorry, here's a quick rabbit hole if you've just don't know me at all and you don't know this story, but a couple of years ago, I accidentally got pregnant and I ended up having a miscarriage. It was just so horrific and hard. And when I was pregnant, I didn't take holy basil because I didn't know if I should. And so I went off of it and I really found my anxiety go bananas. And after I lost the baby, I still didn't take it because I thought, well, it's good. It's sort of like coming out of my system. And I ended up just feeling like a lunatic. Like oh my gosh, my hormones were so whacked because I had all of this hormone surge because of being pregnant. And then I was grieving the loss of this child, and that was horrible. And then I wasn't taking this thing that really was helpful for me. It was this perfect storm that just led to a place of like crazy town. And for me, at least, I can see how that happened because I wasn't taking this thing that was really helpful, but I also hadn't developed any techniques or tools for dealing with anxiety other than numbing the feeling. Because adaptogens are incredible, but adaptogens do mute things. And that's why it's really helpful. I will choose muting an anxiety attack 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000 in my past because that was the only thing I knew how to do. The problem for me was that when I could hit that mute button, it never required me to learn any way to deal with the root of the problem. So basically what I was looking at was the rest of my life taking a supplement to help me, which would be fine, except when you mute a feeling, it mutes other things too. I had gone off my holy basil, went a little bananas, realized I needed to be back on it, got back on it, was so freaking grateful. Oh my God, I was so grateful for that. And about 9 months ago, that was 2 years ago. So about 9 months ago, I started to get the instinct and the intuition that I needed to go off of this supplement. And really that was just because, taking things like vitamin C or calcium or magnesium, things like that make total sense. But I just had this instinct that I should try. And on a whim, I just cold turkey, just raw dogged it. Just like, let's go. No, nothing. We're just going in. And probably 4 days later, started to have anxiety. And for the first time ever, I tried a technique that I had read about 1,000,000 times and that everybody talks about on YouTube and everyone talks about on podcasts and every therapist talks about and every yogi talks about, everybody ever. I breathed. I did box breathing. Do you know box breathing? So if you're not familiar, I do counts of 4. When I started, now I do counts of 5. You breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you hold for 4. 2, 3, 4. Then you breathe out for 4. And then you hold empty lungs for 4. And then breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Hold for 4. It takes about 4 rounds of that for my anxiety to calm. 4 rounds of breathing. Heard about it for decades. Never actually tried it. The reason that it takes about 4 rounds is because I can't focus on anything else other than breathing. The holding no air in my lungs for 4 seconds felt like I was about to die. And in that state, it took all of my focus to keep doing the exercise. So it took about 4 rounds of that, and my mind was clear. And the anxiety was happening because of my thoughts. So all of a sudden, without thoughts, the anxiety dissipated. But I never had that technique because I never had to have that technique. I know I just went on a very long-winded tangent about this numbing feeling, but taking something to numb the anxiety also numbed my creativity. The amount that I have written in the 9 months since I went off the adaptogens is unprecedented. It numbed my sex drive. I'm sorry, TMI. Maybe you didn't want to hear that, but I realize now that that was a huge factor in getting turned on. Is like, I don't know, at least for me, I don't know if you guys are the same, but like so much of being turned on is like what's happening in my mind. But if my mind is muted, then that affects what's happening with my body. So like just all of these things that I never would have thought were being affected. Like you can't mute one part of yourself and think that nothing else is taking it on. Now, flip side, I've learned how to deal with my anxiety, but my insomnia is back. My entire life, like growing up, I used to have insomnia. And it's because I would lay down at night and my mind would start to go and I would just think about everything. And sometimes that's awesome. I'll just like be imagining a future where Oprah invites me over for a slumber party. And then other times it's not awesome because it's my anxious mind and it'll try and take me down a path that I don't want to go. And got to go back to my box breathing and got to go back to this awareness that I am in control. It's a whole big freaking process. But I wanted to include this idea because I know that there are some of you who are like, well, I'm never in a bad mood. Yeah, Sandra, it's because you don't have any moods at all. It's because your moods were so uncomfortable for you or so uncomfortable for the people around you that you thought it was better for you to show up as nothing than to show up as something that might be a little prickly at times. And this is especially true for those of us who are perimenopausal and menopausal, because you and I both know that our hormones affect the way that we feel, which affects our mood, which affects what other people see. And like, oh my God, if we were raised to be a good girl and to be sweet and kind, but you know what? Today you don't really feel like being sweet and kind. Like there's just a whole bunch of crap wrapped up in this. And so it doesn't matter if you're feeling angry and bitter and pissed or you're feeling nothing at all because you feel like you don't want people to know that you're angry and bitter and pissed. There are ways to control your thoughts. There are ways to control your feelings. There are ways to control your mood to guide it in a direction that is better for you. That's the whole conversation. You know me, I like to take 25 minutes to get to the freaking point. And here it is. Here's the third body of water, the river. And when we're in a river, we can fight the current. We can be the salmon that is swimming upstream. We can be the person who's like, I've got this. I'm a hard worker. I can make anything happen. I can do it. Watch me go. Watch me push. Watch me whip. Watch me nay-nay. I'm going right up to the top of the river. We can be that person. Or if we're someone who wants to live a life that feels good, that feels happy, that has joy in it, instead of being the person who's fighting the current, who's swimming upriver, who's trying to prove a point, who's trying to control everything, who, P.S., the salmon dies when it gets to the end of that journey. Instead of being that, what if we just flip around and head the other direction? What if we just go with the flow? What if we just glide along with the current? What if we did that? God, how good would it feel to just take a breath and let it go? Just drop those shoulders away from your ears. Just remind yourself that you are not responsible for other people. You're only responsible for you. What would that look like? To allow yourself to flow and glide with the environment that you're inside of, understanding that you get to control the way you feel about that environment no matter what happens. In personal development, the word that we use for that feeling is mindset. We say, you're in control of your mindset. You are in control of what your mind does and how you look at the world around you. And in woo-woo hippie shit, we call that your vibration. This is your vibe. This is the energy that you bring. This is what level you are hovering at. No matter if we're personal development peeps or if we're hippies, here's one thing that is true. Factual, true. If you are listening to this, It's true. You are in control of your thoughts. You are in control of your thoughts, and I'm going to prove it. Think of a pink elephant. Think of a purple dog. Think of a blue guitar. Now, either you thought of the things I said when I said them, or you were so damn convinced that you needed to be in control of the situation, you forced yourself to think of anything but what I was saying just to prove a point. But in either situation, you controlled your thoughts, right? So if you control your thoughts, then you can control whether you're thinking about something that makes you feel good or you're thinking about something that makes you feel bad. Like any one of us right now could stop. Let's do this as an exercise. Let me prove it to you. It would be very easy. Any of us could think of something that makes us feel bad. It would take a nanosecond. We're not going to do that. We love ourselves. Instead, let's think of something that makes us feel good. I want you to think of someone right now that you feel so grateful for today. Whose face pops into your mind when I say that? Who's someone that you can feel grateful for? Just when I ask that question, like say their name out loud. Who's someone you can feel grateful for? My love is away on business right now. I haven't seen him in a week. So he's very close to my heart always, but especially when he's out of town. So he pops into my head and I think of just a million things that I love about this person. My heart gets so full of joy and love when I imagine his face and his beautiful hair and his hands and his eyes and his smile and how he doubles over when he laughs so hard because he can't stand up straight, and how he makes the most amazing food for our family and how he gives me the best hugs and how he's such a good kisser and how he's so sexy and oh my, he's so hot and he loves me so much and he takes good care of me. Like, see, I just made myself feel so much. I elevated my mood right here with you right now because I was thinking about someone that I appreciate. And maybe you were thinking about your sister, your dog, your kid, your high school crush. Maybe you were thinking about Lady Gaga. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. The act of appreciating something changes your vibration. If you've never heard that word before, we're all energy, right? And we are vibrating on different levels, meaning that we are emitting different levels of energy based on the feeling that we have. More negative and suffering emotions emit a lower level energy. And happier, joyful, curiosity, laughter, like those emotions have a higher vibe energy. It just is true. Even if you're being cantankerous and you're like, that I don't know what vibration is and I don't believe. Yes, you do. You have experienced this. You must have experienced a time in your life where you were in a super bad, grumpy mood and you were all dark and twisty and you didn't feel good and you were just like in a ball of whatever, versus you were having the best day of your life. You just got the number of the cutest girl in town and you got gas in your tank and you're feeling really good and you got a haircut and you're walking down the street and you're like, your vibe's different. You feel good because you are pumping out a different level of energy into the world around you. That's your vibration. And you raise your vibration based on thought. So if you can raise your vibration based on thought, and you can control your thoughts, then at any moment, you can change how you feel. So why doesn't everyone believe this already? Why don't we naturally gravitate to this? Why did some of you hear this and you called BS because you're like, that's not true. I can't control my thoughts. I get it. I told you that I struggle with anxiety, which has got to be one of the leading mind control stews that you can find yourself inside of. Because I will tell you, in my past, when I was having an anxiety attack, I did not feel like I could control my mind. When I've had panic attacks, I felt completely out of control of not just my mind, but also my body. The reason that we don't think we can control our thoughts is practice. We have a whole hell of a lot of practice feeling bad. We have so much practice swirling around negative thoughts. We have so much experience with circular, obsessive thinking about negative things. And we have this because things that scare us, things that produce a fear response inside of our brain, get registered as something dangerous. I'm sure you've heard me say this. If you haven't heard me say this, you probably heard someone else talk about the idea that our brains are still wired for a very old version of humanity. Our brains are wired with a fight or flight response that is something that was meant to save our lives when we were running from a saber-toothed tiger back in the beginning of time, right? Fight or flight was, hey, if something scares me, my body is going to flood with adrenaline so that I have more power in my muscles so that I can use every bit of strength I have to get away from this thing that is trying to kill me. Human beings are just like any other animal. We are trained for survival, and our survival technique was fight or flight. So going back forever, this has been a part of humanity. This experience of something scares me, oh my God, I'm going to die. This adrenaline floods my system. Let me get away, right? Back then it was helpful because it was saving you from a tiger. But today, as you are listening to this, most of you are not encountering a saber-toothed tiger on the regular, right? Today, saber-toothed tiger looks like getting pissed off in traffic. It looks like dealing with your in-laws. It looks like having to go to an experience you don't like. It looks like pick the thing that scared you today. Pick the thing that pissed you off this week. Just choose. I'm sure you can come up with all kinds of answers if you tap yourself to figure out what has triggered this in you this week. You're going into experience, your brain is going, OMG, we're about to die because we're upset. Hormones are flooding your system. But guess what? You don't fight and you don't flight. You don't do anything because you're not actually running from something scary. And if all of a sudden you decided to fight or run away from your boss that you don't like, you probably wouldn't have your job for very long. So you just sit there in the feeling with your body filled with stress hormones and nowhere to put it. And you do this over and over and over and over till your mind is so whacked out, till your body is so confused. 99% of people are doing this every day, after day, after day, for their entire lives. And maybe if you're lucky, you've learned some ways to manage stress, so at least you're handling those stress hormones when they flood your system, if you're lucky. But very few people are doing the work to even understand what's happening to their body in the first place. If your body has practiced something hundreds of times a year for the entirety of your life, how good are you at doing that thing? Really good. Now, on the flip side, for those of you who are like, Rach, you don't know, I can't control my emotions. I can't control my thoughts because my thoughts run away with me. Okay, then here's my follow-up. How much practice do you have redirecting your thoughts when they start to go to an anxious place? How much practice do you have redirecting your thoughts when you start to get pissed off, when you are annoyed with your teenager, when you're frustrated with your wife? How much practice do you have controlling your thoughts to lead you to a better place? My instinct is that you have far less practice redirecting your thoughts to positivity than you do obsessively swirling around in negativity, right? So this is really just a case of you have done something thousands and thousands of times, and this one you did 3 times on a yoga retreat. And so you don't understand that it works, and you don't understand how powerful it can be, and you don't understand how much better it can make your life. That's why you think you can't control your thoughts. You think you can't control your thoughts because you have become conditioned to allow your thoughts to control you. Now, let's do another test. All right, so we've established this idea that we have gotten very good at thinking negatively. We've gotten very good at being afraid. We've gotten very good at being anxious. We've gotten very good at being pissed off. We've gotten very good at these suffering emotions. So might it be possible that we could get very good at their opposite? Of course. And not only is it possible, but again, I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning, that there are people right now who are so much worse off than you are, that are so much worse off than I am, and are happier than both of us combined. They're living a better life than both of us combined based on the way they think about the world around them. My favorite example of just two people thinking completely differently and it affecting their outcome involves my boo again. So I think you guys know by now, my fiance's name is Kez. We've been together for 3.5 years. And I have this memory of us traveling during the pandemic. It was like 2021. So it was we were far removed. You could travel, you could take airplane, whatever, but it was like you could wear a mask or not wear a mask. That transitional time when everyone was coming out of pandemic and like lots of people still wore masks and they were sort of frustrated that other people didn't. And then other people didn't wear masks and would look at the people who wore masks. It was just like, that time. It was like a weird time. I know y'all haven't met Kez, but he is just one of the most grounded, centered, kind, like beautiful souls. Everybody who knows him loves him. He's just an amazing human. And we were on a trip and we had gotten on the plane and we're sitting in our seats and he was on the aisle. And he's beautiful and he has like gorgeous curly hair and he looks like he works in the music industry. He does, but he looks like he works in the music industry, wears like rings and jewelry and whatever. So lots of people stop him. Lots of people comment on his style and like compliment his hair and whatever. And we're sitting on the plane and he's wearing a vintage Metallica t-shirt. And I don't know the album. I wear the shirt all the time because it's a really good vintage shirt, but I know one song by Metallica and that is Enter Sandman. And I'm terrified that some bro is going to ask me like what my favorite song off this album is. And I'm going to be like, it's my boyfriend's. I don't know. But apparently it's a great album. He loves Metallica. He's wearing this vintage shirt. And he gets a lot of compliments on the shirt because other people who love the band are like, oh, I can't believe you have that shirt. So he's sitting on the plane. He's wearing this shirt. And we just sat down on the plane and we're not wearing masks, but he's spraying hand sanitizer on his hands. He's got like some sort of organic, good smelling, who even knows, hand sanitizer. He's spraying it on his hands. And a guy walks by, sort of an older man, like just because I'm picking up the vibe of everybody, just cantankerous, just like he's definitely not wearing a mask. He's for sure judging people who are. He's just like got his own opinions. He's in a little bit of a mood and he looks at Kez, who's spraying the stuff on his hands, and he's like, that's what changed the world. We never came back after that, right? I mean, that's what changed the world. And he's like grouchy curmudgeon as he says it. And it's one of those things where he's sort of like stalled out by our seats because of the line to get to his seat. And he's like stalled out. He's just kind of standing there. And Kez sees the good in everybody. Just like loves everybody, assumes everybody's a good vibe, assumes everybody's his friend. It's not even a question. He literally he looks up at the guy and he's like, oh, I know, right? It's their best album. And he just starts going off on like how great the album is and like, this song meant this to me and I got to see them live on this date. The old man is looking at the hand sanitizer. He's looking at the hand sanitizer and the people wearing masks on this plane, and he's commenting on, the snowflakes of the world who put hand sanitizer on to keep themselves from getting sick. So he's looking at the hand sanitizer saying, that's what changed the world. We never came back after it. But because of the way Kez looks at the world, it didn't even occur to him that the guy was being rude. So when the old man said it, he assumed, because his hands were here in front of his shirt, he assumed that the guy was talking about his shirt. He didn't even see any negativity in the moment. He just started talking to this man about Metallica. And in this moment, I watched this old man who was trying to be a grouchy a-hole completely change. And he was like, I haven't listened to that album, because Kez was like just so happy about it and so infectious. And I got to see him at this and blah, blah, blah. Kez is so pumped about what he's talking about that the old man's like, I'm not familiar with that album, but I really love. And the old man starts talking about his favorite band. And then they're just talking about music while the guy's standing there. Kez's vibration, one of joy and curiosity and like everybody I see as my friend, changed the vibration of this old man who's trying to talk shit. That is the power of you choosing to set the mood. Like, you are existing inside of a space so that it doesn't matter what you are experiencing externally. It's not changing who you are. Stephen Covey said, carry your own weather. I use this quote all the time because I love it so much. Carry your own weather. Bring the sunshine with you. Decide that you are in control of it. Because I'll tell you what, if that old man said something grouchy to me, I haven't done enough work. I would react like I would feel like I was getting in trouble. I would feel like I'm being reprimanded. I would have shut down. I would have shut down if this old man said the exact same thing to me he said to my boyfriend. But he said it to my boyfriend who's at a completely different vibrational level. And so the mood completely changed. It was almost like he had this like bubble around him that was like, if you want to come into my sphere, you are going to be affected positively by my energy. I refuse to be negatively affected by yours. We can absolutely control our mindset. We can control our mood. And unsurprisingly to me, and maybe to you if we've hung out before, I have talked for almost an hour about this subject. So I am not able to get to the part of this conversation where I tell you how to change your mood. So we're going to do a two-parter, guys. We're going to turn this into a two-parter. So this will be part 1, and you can come back tomorrow and we will play part 2, which will be the how. So first episode, we're talking about why. I hope I've pumped you up to the idea that yes, you can make this change. And then second conversation is going to be about how. How do you change your mood? I'm going to get into some really specific tactics that you can use inside of every day that will hopefully help you to change your mood and change it again and change it again and change it again until you have practiced this so much that it becomes who you are. Thank you for hanging out for this episode. If you found part 1 helpful, hopefully you find them both helpful. But if you found this helpful, I hope you will consider sharing with someone that you know, someone in your community, putting it up in your stories, or just sending it to a friend you think might dig it too. I will be back soon with more conversation. And until then, as always, I love you and I'm rooting for you.